The movie begins by showing a mental hospital in America, which will be officially closed on that day. The officers who work there gather together, enjoying their last moments as a form of celebration for the togetherness that has been established. As they were celebrating their last day, a female officer came with a document. Apparently, the government had left a unique patient who needed evaluation. The government asked for their help to assess the patient immediately. Because of this, several hospital officials gathered to welcome his arrival. They were both tense and curious, wondering what made this patient so special. All eyes were on the elevator at the entrance. When the elevator doors opened, a new patient came out with a security guard. The patient strolled, his sharp eyes looking at the staff one by one. His body was large, and in addition to wearing a mask, he was also wrapped in protective plastic, adding a mysterious and tense aura to his presence. The government officer escorting the patient delivered a stern message to the staff of the psychiatric hospital. He asked them to look after the patient with the utmost care and caution. If you are negligent, he said in a serious tone, then everyone here might regret it for the rest of their lives. The message made the atmosphere even more tense, adding to the sense of vigilance among the staff. A nurse named Paul walked up to the hospital secretary, Stephanie, who seemed to be busy taking care of the new patient's paperwork. As she opened the file, Stephanie suddenly looked nervous. Her face turned a little pale as she read an essential piece of information. This patient had a history of killing 5 women. This fact makes the atmosphere between them even more tense. Mays, one of the higher-ups at the psychiatric hospital, explained to Stephanie that this new patient was deeply traumatized by a car accident that claimed the lives of his family. Tragically, the perpetrator of the accident escaped and was never found. Elsewhere, a nurse named Noob, who monitors the security cameras every day, was absent from his post this time. He decides to leave his duties for a moment and witness the arrival of the latest, much-anticipated patient. Because of this, an officer named Mel was forced to remain on standby in front of the security monitor without letting her guard down. Noob's departure left her in a bit of a pickle in the room. Meanwhile, Noob was too focused on the female patient in the room. Without realizing it, he made a loud squeaking sound in the new patient's room. Upon hearing the sound, the new patient looked in great pain and immediately covered both ears as if trapped in deep pain. Mel continued to monitor the security room relentlessly, only able to leave Noob unaware that his actions had disturbed the new patient. After some time, Noob went to the toilet. Inside the toilet, someone secretly came and deliberately opened the entire sink's water faucet, then blocked the sink's water drain with paper towels. As a result, water began to pool, and the sink in the toilet was flooded. Noob, who noticed the stagnant water, rushed out of the toilet, but as soon as he stepped out, bad luck befell him. From then on, Noob lost his life in an unexpected incident. Mel was completely unaware that the new patient had walked out of his room. Her unawareness was only revealed when the news of the missing patient was finally told to all employees at the mental hospital. The atmosphere immediately turned into panic. All the staff, who were previously calm, now felt anxious and worried. They immediately rushed to find and confirm the patient's whereabouts, fearing what could happen next. An emergency meeting was called. In an increasingly tense situation, a senior security officer made a firm decision to close all access roads in the hospital. The only access that remained open was the emergency staircase, which was used as an evacuation route in case anything untoward happened. All other exits were locked, and the elevator system was shut down so that no one could access it. This decision was taken to ensure that the missing patient could not escape any further and to keep everyone in the hospital safe. After a long wait, Mel still hadn't seen any movement from the new patient. In the growing tension, Mel finally suggested that the higher-ups of the psychiatric hospital call the police. Mason, a senior official in charge of the asylum, agreed to the suggestion and immediately tried to contact the police. Unfortunately, when Mason called them, the police gave a surprising answer. They would not come directly because they were looking for food first. Suddenly, the new patient deliberately covered the security camera with pillocks, making the image on the monitor blurry. Mel, who had been watching for a long time, finally noticed. A look of confusion and dizziness was clearly visible on her face. Mason, who was leading the meeting, and all the nurses in the room felt even more cornered and confused. Mel, who felt guilty and scared, with a trembling voice, revealed that she was willing not to be paid as long as she could leave this hospital immediately. Mel immediately tried to escape from the psychiatric hospital through the emergency staircase, running as fast as she could to save herself. However, her efforts were met with a new patient on the way. Mercilessly, the patient, who had previously looked calm, now turned highly aggressive. With no security cameras in sight, the patient went crazy, brutally attacking Mel. In an instant, Mel was unable to defend herself, and the patient sadistically killed her on the spot. Mason, unaware of the tragic events that had befallen Mel, still assumed that Mel was in the security room, monitoring the situation as usual. Meanwhile, Stephanie, Maze, and an office boy were trapped in the secretary's room. The office boy deliberately placed himself to sleep, trying to hold the door with his body in an attempt to protect them from the threat of the patients who were still on the loose. On the other hand, the head of security and Paul were wandering around together, searching each room. As they approached the men's restroom, Paul decided to enter, but as soon as he opened the door, he was immediately startled by the arrival of the new patient, the head of security, who had seen this panic to death. In an instant, the new patient brutally attacked Paul, torturing him until there was nothing left. Afterward, the patient came out of the toilet and went straight to the head of security. However, surprisingly, although the head of security looked terrified and resigned, he was not attacked. Despite being resigned to following the same fate as Paul, the newest patient let him live. Without doing anything to him, the patient walked away, leaving the security chief shocked and confused, wondering why he was left alive while Paul had to lose his life. Elsewhere, two women, a senior nurse, and a junior nurse, form a team. However, the younger junior nurse is having fun drinking in the warehouse and even annoys the senior with her antics. What started as a joke ended in disaster.
Oh my God!
At first, the two of them were chatting and joking around, enjoying a relaxing moment amidst the tension in the hospital. However, the atmosphere suddenly changed. As the junior nurse returned for a glass of water and looked back, unknowingly, behind the senior nurse stood a terrifying new patient, holding a machete in his hand. Before the senior nurse could realize the danger, the patient quickly attacked her. Without a fight, the senior nurse died instantly, leaving the shocked and terrified junior nurse in the middle of the chaos. The shocked and hysterical junior nurse immediately fled, running without stopping, trying to avoid the increasingly vicious patient. She had no idea where to go, focusing only on getting out of the asylum. However, her efforts were in vain. The new patient continued to pursue her mercilessly. In her confusion, the young nurse tried to escape through the last door, only to find it locked. Terrified, she turned around and ran into the car park, trying to hide behind a vehicle, hoping to trick the patient who was stalking her. At first, it seemed like she had succeeded, but the ferocious patient was not as stupid as she thought. The patient was, in fact, getting closer and quickly found her trail. In an instant, the young nurse could no longer escape. Her death was brutally picked up right in the car park, adding to the list of victims of the increasingly terrible patient. Long story short, a police car finally arrived at the mental hospital. Only 2 police officers arrived, and they only checked the outside of the hospital out of sheer laziness. They checked the courtyard all the way to the end, but after that, the conclusion they came to was that this location was very safe. It was so secure that they didn't even intend to go inside the psychiatric hospital and assumed the call they received was just a prank call. With that, they returned to the car and left the hospital without knowing the chaos that was unfolding inside. Long story short, the head of security tried to contact Mason, but it turned out that Mason had a different plan. Mason deliberately went to the notification room to call the patient. In the notice, Mason explained that the patient's madness was caused by the escape of the perpetrator who ran over the patient's family to death. Mason then asked the patient to meet him in a more hidden place, namely in the basement. Instantly, Mason left the notification room and headed to the basement. Even though he had a bad feeling about the meeting, Mason went anyway. Arriving underground, he finally met the malignant patient. The patient looked at Mason with a hateful and angry gaze. However, Mason provoked the patient's anger, making him even more upset. The vicious patient relentlessly chased Mason, running fast and furious. Mason, who felt cornered, immediately looked for a place to hide. Luckily, he managed to find a hidden cubicle in the wall, and there he hid. The patient continued to look for Mason, but he was confused and did not realize that Mason was hidden in the room. Mason could only hold his breath, hoping that the patient would leave and he could survive. On the other hand, Stephanie finally confessed that she was the culprit who ran over the family of the vicious patient and intentionally ran away without taking responsibility. The confession shocked everyone, especially Maze, who felt deeply disappointed. Maze thought that this was Stephanie's just reward for the crimes she had committed, but what confused her even more was the fact that innocent people had to be victimized in this mess. Unfortunately, the head of security was trapped in the elevator. He felt panicked and trapped, with the situation becoming increasingly tense. The tension and pressure he felt caused a heart attack, making him fall to the ground with a limp body. Meanwhile, Mason, who was trapped and could no longer escape, felt cornered. The vicious patient continued to glare at him with a hateful gaze. Suddenly, Stephanie appeared and revealed herself in front of the patient, claiming to be the main culprit behind the death of the patient's family. She hopes that her confession will stop the violence, but the patient prefers to slaughter Mason instead. Mason, who was already out of breath and unable to escape, eventually lost his life in horrific circumstances. He was left for dead, and Stephanie, who witnessed the incident, could only cry, regretting her actions. Finally, Maze was seen walking towards the now open exit. However, the closer she gets to the door, the more it becomes clear that there is a big secret hidden behind all these horrific events. As it turned out, there was no government handover, as previously claimed. It was all a lie. Maze made a significant contribution to getting the malignant patient into the asylum. In fact, Maze only wanted to smoothen the patient's revenge plan. Even more shocking was the fact that the patient wasn't really mentally ill. He was actually an ordinary man who had devised a meticulous revenge plan. The patient had paid Maze to smoothen the act and allowed himself to be trapped in a mental hospital. Thus, all the horrific events that happened so far were part of an elaborate revenge plan. The movie comes to an end.